Blaine Fowler, 1984 national champion quarterback on BYU's football team, also a dual threat analyst for us on BYU TV. But Blaine, we're going to start with this question, and it's one from one of our members of BYU Sports Nation at Coey Jupes. He asks this: how do you keep your hair perfect at all times?
It's really about a lot of hairspray. That's what it's about. a lot of hairspray. So there's some significant product in there, and
brush,
and
comb.
I've told you guys before that I wake up and it's like this, but to keep it that way, especially on a day like today when the wind's blowing, it just takes a lot of hairspray.
That's amazing. And if you've got a question for Blaine related to sports as well, you can use the hashtag BYUSend. Let's get to another Twitter.
If anybody needs, some specifics on products and that, we can have a private talk. But the good news is, we've talked about this before. If I'm walking down the street and say an anvil falls off the top of a building, or a piano, say, and it's coming down on me, what I know is going to happen is it's going to hit my hair, it's going to bounce off, and I'm going to be fine.
Wow.
That's a lot of product.
That is some serious hairspray.
At Billy Wonka has a question for you as well. Actually, let's get to that in a moment. We've been talking about BYU and Utah and the scheduling priority with BYU and the Salt Lake Tribune article that came out and the email conversation between Chris Hill and Tom Hummel. Our Twitter question today: where does the Utah football game rank in scheduling priority for BYU fans? What do you think?
I found out since the thing has been on hiatus how important it is to the fans. I mean, I didn't realize. I was fine with them not playing for a couple of years because I felt like it had gotten so ugly from a fan's perspective that I was okay with it cooling off a little bit. But I've talked to so many people that are fans, true Cougar fans, and Utah fans, so on both sides of this thing, that really, really miss this rivalry and feel like it needs to be played every single year. And so for the fans' sake, I agree that it needs to be an every-year thing. I would like to see it scheduled toward the end of the year. And I know Utah's acting like that's a tough thing, but if the conference is going to allow SC to schedule Notre Dame, their natural rival, later in the year, BYU and Utah, which is a rivalry that's one of the best in the country, should have an exception where they could fit that in at the end of the season.
Now, we anticipated that our Twitter followers and the members of BYU Sports Nation would kind of say the same thing that you just told us, Blaine, that most people miss it. They want it. It's intense. It's fun. But the overwhelming reaction, at least thus far, has been, meh. If we're scheduling Michigan State and LSU and Nebraska and Missouri, we don't really need Utah.
That surprised us a lot, Blaine.
What do you think about that reaction?
It surprises me too, but the problem is, can we schedule? I mean, there have been, the next couple of years the schedule is great, but it's still not great at the end of the year. I would much rather play another big school like Utah, if we could get it late in the season, than play some of the teams that BYU still has on the schedule late in the season. And that's the thing. If we can schedule Utah, I don't care. I wanted to play LSU and Michigan State and all of those, but most of those games are going to come in the first 2 months. We get to November, with few exceptions, and that schedule kind of tapers off. I would love to see a November game against Utah every single year. That's my own personal opinion, and I was one that said when it went away, that's okay with me. I'm fine with that. But I'm finding myself missing it, and I like the focus on it for a whole week or longer for the local fans on both sides of it, and I think it's needed. And natural rivalries are important to college football, and so I think they do need to play Utah. But I'm surprised that that's been the results you've seen, that folks just don't care about it as much as they thought. And everyone thought maybe if it went away for a couple of years, people would lose their passion for it. Maybe that's happening.
The timing has very little to do with it for me. I just want to play the game, and Utah obviously has different kind of scheduling issues or whatnot. Yet I don't think that BYU is going to say, we're going to do whatever it takes. We're going to have to move games. I don't think BYU is going to do that, Blaine, to get Utah on the schedule. What do you think?
No, I think if they're not getting cooperation going both ways, that both, I think BYU is just going to go, you know what, we want to play it. It is important. Bronco has said that. It's an in-state game that should be played. But BYU's not going to do, obviously they're not going to do 2-for-1s, but they're not going to
No way.
They're not going to get out of some of these other big games just to accommodate. Nor do I think Utah is. But when it's all said and done, I heard Utah coming from the Utah side. Well, we replaced BYU on the schedule with Michigan. Well, Michigan was awful last year. And not that BYU was great, but Michigan didn't do anything more for their strength of schedule than BYU would have done. And so I think they can get, on a typical year, both of those teams are good enough that they're perfectly fine for strength of schedule stuff if you want to get into a New Year's Six type bowl. And it's not better for Utah to go play Michigan than it is for them to play BYU. There's not as much interest. And you know what? People on a national basis, unless Michigan's really good, they don't care that Utah's playing Michigan. They really don't. People are more interested in BYU Utah, especially out here in the West. And so unless Utah's playing a Michigan team that's ranked and people are tuning in to watch Michigan, they're not going, oh, wow, that's an intriguing matchup. I got to tune into that. The casual fans doesn't care about that game. Utah fans do and Michigan fans do. So there's a lot more people interested in BYU Utah than Utah Michigan.
Now, from a national standpoint, Blaine, BYU has been asked by Dr. Chris Hill, not asked, but he said, hey, we've got openings on September 14th and September 21st of 2019. BYU already has games with Washington and USC scheduled on those dates. Jeremy and I were just talking about, okay, would BYU give up a team like Washington to play Utah on that date? And our discussion was, well, we're not sure that BYU would gain that much more recognition from beating Utah compared to Washington, or playing Utah compared to Washington, from a national perspective. USC is in a different category, but if Washington...
Yes, I was just going to say that. We really should just be talking about Washington, because SC is a whole different story, right? And SC has been a little down, but I think that's over. I think SC is going to return now with Sark there to an elite program in the country. So that's different. But Washington, I think that BYU ought to explore. Can they move the Washington game? Would Washington be willing to cooperate? I think it's worth working on. The USC thing, they got to play USC. That's a whole different ball game, different category. But Washington's an up and coming. See, I mean, Utah's been as good as Washington in the last couple of years. I just assume play Utah, but I think it's worth working on to try to keep them both on the schedule.
Blaine Fowler's on BYU Sports Nation. Let's look at the draft prospects now for BYU. As Alani Fua was the lone Cougar at the Combine, showed well in a couple of different categories there, a couple different drills. Who do you think is the most likely guy to make an NFL roster for BYU this upcoming season?
Well, I think Alani has a chance, and the fact that he's the only one that was invited, but I think he has a chance to actually get drafted if he can improve on the strength parts, explosive parts of his numbers when he does pro day or when he works out individually. Because on the agility parts, he was really good. He was top five. Like the 3-cone drill and the 20-yard and 60-yard shuttle, he was third, fourth, and fourth amongst all linebackers. But where he was really disappointing was in the strength thing. He only benched 225 18 times. And to be considered solid as a linebacker, you've got to be 23, 24, 25, or above. If he went in there and did 21, 22, I would have been okay with it because of his slight frame. But I think people are looking at him for potential. And so if he can come and do 18 there at the Combine, and he ran a 4.68 40, or a 4.7 340, you need to be probably 4.68 4.65 to be in that top 15. So if he can go run in the mid 4.6s at pro day and get that bench up 21, 22, they're going to go, okay, this is what we thought about him. He's got great potential. He's raw. Where he has to develop is in the strength area. He's got all the quickness we want in the world. And I think if he can improve those, he gets drafted in the late rounds and he's got a shot. I'll tell you the guy I think really has a shot is Paul CK. And he's maybe best if he signs as a free agent so he can go with a team that really values a physical blocking fullback. But much like other big backs that have come out of BYU, if he gets in the right system, he's a road grader, and he can block for a feature tailback in a two-back system. And if he can stay healthy, I mean, that's a guy that can probably play a long, long time. And you think about his upside potential, he just hasn't been playing football that long. But from a physical perspective, he is a man-child out there just knocking people silly, and NFL loves physical play out of fullbacks. And so who plays the longest? If he can stay healthy, somebody is willing to look at him as just as a project that can develop because he's just so raw. Lasike's probably your guy that plays a long time in the league.
Well, he went on a mission, so he's obviously had a physical advantage and is very mature, right?
Yeah.
All he did was work out in Alabama for 2 years.
Yeah, you know what I had? So I did the Utah State Fresno State game up in Logan on Saturday night for ESPN, and Ari Wolf and I got in a conversation on the drive back, and And we started talking about that, and I go, Ari, what do you think these guys do on their mission? I've had 3 kids serve missions. They're not working out. They come back, they're awful. I mean, it takes them a long time to get back. It's not an advantage for a skill player, even a fullback, to be on a mission. Maybe a lineman gets a little more maturity, but they still come back and are starting from square one in terms of their strength development. This whole idea that that's an advantage, that's a bunch of baloney.
It's the biggest possible disadvantage that you could create is going on a mission.
Absolutely.
But they're grown men. They're grown men.
I'm telling you what, to take off for 2 years, I don't care if you're doing push-ups and jumping rope and going for a run every morning on your mission. You come back and you are starting all over again.
I apologize for getting on my soapbox.
No, but you want to know what? It's not just a physical thing. It's a mental thing too. You got to get that edge back. And there are many kids that go out on their missions and they become a lot kinder and gentler. And you know what? You want to play in the trenches in college football, you got to want to rip somebody's face off. And sometimes
that's not in the Beatitudes.
They don't want to rip somebody's face off after they just got back from a mission. It takes time to reprogram them that way, too. And hopefully what we do is reprogram them and we go, hey, you know how you were on your mission? That's how we want you off the field. But we want you to step across that white line and turn into a crazy man. And that's hard to do. That's a hard thing to do, but that's what BYU has to do, and that's what they deal with. It is not an advantage in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, just ask Kalani Fua. He did the mission thing. He knows all about it. Now he's trying to make the NFL. Blaine, let's flip the script to basketball now. BYU facing an enormous week on a Northwest road trip, starting with at Portland on Thursday and then at the Kennel, where Gonzaga has the nation's longest home win streak. When you look at BYU, what kind of a chance do you give them on this Northwest road swing, and where do you think they are from an NCAA tournament status?
Well, so at Portland, and they got to focus on that. And you remember that first game, the Portland game, they were without Kevin Bailey, who's another guard scorer that's really, really good. And, and they'll have Bailey back, so that's just another challenge. They got in a scoring match with these guys, and when you get Hawes with 24 and Winder with 22 and Collinsworth with 21 and Fisher with 16 or Halford with 14, they can pretty much go out and outscore anybody when all those guys are hitting, right? And they did a nice job, although they allowed Wintering with his quickness to attempt 17 free throws and make 15 of 70 or 15 of 17, 30 points. So they just have to stay in front of the guards and guard without fouling and not allow Portland to stay in the game by making a bunch of free throws. They did a great job on Vander Mars and Garoon in that first one. So I like their chances against Portland. I think they come and they win that one, and then that sets up a great matchup with the Zags. And, we can look back and look at that one. BYU stayed in that game by being on attack and getting to the free throw line. But for them to get over that hump and steal one at Gonzaga, which would shock a lot of people, including me, they're going to have to get much better play out of the guard line. Fisher and Winder have to play well. They've got to guard. They've got to hold Pangos down. They got to make. They did a good job on Bell in the first game, but they can't let both of those guys go off. Wilcher's going to get points, but they need to hold him down in the rebounding area. And then if they can keep Wilcher and Karnowski to under double-digit rebounds and 15 or less, and then just not let Pangos and Bell go off, I mean, they have a chance. They stayed with them in that first game, and they were miserable shooting threes. And so the only possible way that they beat Gonzaga up there is if BYU is just firing on all cylinders, and they do what they did against Portland in their first matchup, and that's have Fisher shooting lights out, Winder shooting lights out, Halford contributing, Hawes being his normal self and Collinsworth being his normal self. This has to be a group effort. They've got to be able to guard inside without fouling because Gonzaga's got so many bigs that they can bring off the bench that BYU just doesn't have the depth to match up. But, I mean, it's a tall task, guys, but they're capable. I mean, we've seen BYU come out and shoot lights out on certain nights. They have to have one of those nights. But if Fisher's just knocking down everything in sight and Winder's hitting them from the other side, hey, I like their ability to stay with anybody in the country. It's a long shot. They'll get Portland. And then that Zags game is a long shot.
Blaine Fowler, great hair, great knowledge of basketball and football. Always nice to talk to you, Blaine.
Good to talk to you guys. Take care.